She said, "I need a break." It was a Tuesday night when everything started to fall apart. The apartment was unusually quiet, the hum of the city outside barely reaching us. I was sitting on the couch, flipping through an old magazine that I had long forgotten about. The soft glow from the living room lamp illuminated the space, but it did nothing to ease the tension hanging in the air. Natalie stood in the middle of the room, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her gaze fixed on the carpet. I could tell something was coming. You could always tell when someone was rehearsing a line in their head, their body language betraying them. She opened her mouth, and I knew this wasn't going to be good. "Daniel," she said, her voice uncharacteristically calm. "I think I need a break to figure out what I really want." I didn't flinch. I didn't jump to conclusions. I just leaned back on the couch, studying her face. It was strange, almost polite, like someone asking for directions. It wasn't the panic-stricken expression I expected, or the crying, or the begging. No, this was something colder, more final. I had heard this line before from other people, always masked as a break, but it was always about someone else waiting in the wings. A space where they could figure things out, but only to return when they were ready. I sighed, keeping my tone even. "All right, take all the time you need." Her eyes widened in shock, as if she hadn't expected this response from me. "Wait, you're okay with that?" "Sure," I said, nodding slowly. "But let's make one thing clear. If we're not together, we don't live together. You'll need to pack your things." Her mouth opened slightly, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of confusion cross her face, but it was too late. I had said what needed to be said. "Wait, that's not what I meant," she stammered, stepping toward me. "I just need some time." I wasn't. I stood up then, slowly, making sure I wasn't raising my voice, but that my words were undeniable. "This apartment's under my name. You said you need time to figure things out. Fine. Do that somewhere else." The silence between us stretched long and painful. Her eyes darted around the room, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She looked as if the walls themselves had betrayed her. "You're being unreasonable," she finally said, her voice cracking. "No, I'm not," I replied, my voice steady. "I'm respecting your decision. You wanted a break. I'm giving you one." She tried to muster a smile, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. "I thought you'd fight for me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I shrugged. "You can't fight for someone who's already somewhere else." And with that, I turned and walked toward the door, not looking back. The weight of the moment was too heavy, and I had no idea what was going to happen next. I told her I'd be changing the locks the next evening and that she should collect her things before then. The silence in the apartment was suffocating. The entire room felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to snap. When I returned from work the next day, everything she owned was gone. There was no note, no goodbye. Just a key left on the counter with a message, "You'll regret this." I wasn't sure what kind of regret I was supposed to feel, but I had already moved on. I'd seen the signs too clearly. She wasn't just trying to find herself, she had already found someone else. And I wasn't going to wait around while she figured out what that meant for us. That night, I did what I could to distract myself. I worked late, keeping my mind occupied with anything other than her. But then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Sabrina, Natalie's younger sister. "Just so you know," she wrote, "Lillian's staying with Henry. She says it's temporary." I stared at the message for a while, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. "Thanks for telling me," I texted back. "Don't get involved in this." Sabrina's reply came quickly. "Too late." It was clear now. She was gone, and so was any part of me that had still cared. What was left of my life was about to be rebuilt, and nothing was going to stop that from happening. Later, as I continued to go about my days, Sabrina kept me updated on the latest developments. Lillian's social media exploded with posts about healing, about choosing herself, about moving on. Her friends were full of encouraging comments, and I was the villain in her story. I knew better than to engage. It was clear now that she had always planned her exit. It was just a matter of time before she found her way to Henry, and I wasn't going to waste any more energy fighting for someone who had already walked away. Her performance on social media was all too familiar. The dramatic posts, the self-congratulatory captions, it was all a carefully curated image. But I had learned long ago not to buy into it. What she wanted me to regret, I was already past. It had been a few days since Lillian left, and the apartment still felt too big for just me. The silence was both comforting and suffocating, an odd balance I wasn't sure how to handle. I had spent years building my life with her, and now it all felt like it had disappeared in the blink of an eye. I didn't know where to put all the thoughts that crowded my mind, so I buried them in the work I had started to neglect in the last few months. I needed a change of scenery, something to force me to reset. So, when my boss, Gary, called me into his office one Thursday morning, I didn't hesitate. "Daniel," Gary said, closing the door behind me. "We've got a mess in Barcelona. The structural retrofit is behind schedule. The client's furious, and the project manager just quit. We need someone who can handle the pressure. You up for it?" The timing couldn't have been more perfect. I didn't even need to think twice. "I'm in," I said. There was no point in wasting time dwelling on the past. I needed to leave. A fresh start, away from everything. From her. From the life I thought we were building together. I made the move to Barcelona within the week, settling into a small but functional apartment near the project site. The work was intense. Every day was consumed by meetings, site checks, and progress reports. The pace was grueling, but it was exactly what I needed. It kept me grounded, focused. Emily, a colleague from the office, joined me in Barcelona for an art program she had been accepted into. It felt strange at first, having someone else around, but the more time we spent together, the more I realized how much I appreciated the simplicity of her presence. There were no games, no hidden motives. Just a genuine friendship. A few days into her arrival, we sat on the balcony one evening, taking a break from our hectic schedules. She looked at me for a while, then spoke up softly. "You know she's still talking about you online, right?" I nodded. "I figured." "She's saying you had anger issues, that you kicked her out without warning," Emily continued, her voice tinged with concern. I leaned back in my chair, watching the city skyline. "Let her. Truth doesn't need a spotlight." She glanced over at me, clearly unsure whether I was suppressing my emotions or truly indifferent. "You don't even care what she's doing now?" "I already know," I said calmly. "She's still trying to control the story." Emily was quiet for a moment before she spoke again, her voice thoughtful. "You sound like you've made peace with it." "I have," I replied. She lost the only person who never needed to be managed. There was a finality in my words that I hadn't realized was there until now. A weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and for the first time in weeks, I felt free. Over the next few weeks, things in Barcelona started to fall into place. The project was on track again, and Gary kept in constant contact to make sure everything was moving smoothly. But it wasn't just the work that was keeping me occupied. I found myself growing closer to Emily, sharing dinners, talking about our pasts, our future, and everything in between. It wasn't long before we were spending more and more time together, both in and outside of work. There was no rush, no pressure. It just felt, Emily wasn't trying to fill the void left by Lillian. She was just herself, and for the first time in a long time, I realized that was enough for me. But then one evening, just as things were settling into a comfortable routine, I received another message. This one was from Sabrina. "She's texting your parents now," Sabrina wrote, "saying you manipulated her. What's going on?" I stared at the message, a sinking feeling in my stomach. Lillian had already started spinning her narrative to everyone she could. It wasn't enough that she had left, that she had moved on with Henry. Now she was trying to pull everyone else into her drama. She wanted me to be the villain. I wasn't going to let that happen. I picked up the phone and called my parents, telling them everything about Lillian's infidelity, her lies, and the months she had spent seeing Henry behind my back. "Good," my father said after hearing everything. "It's time you let this go, son." I agreed. Lillian had tried to control the story for long enough. But she couldn't control me anymore. Not now. Not ever again. As the weeks passed, the project in Barcelona wrapped up ahead of schedule. Gary was impressed, calling me into his office and congratulating me for pulling off a rescue job under pressure. It was exactly the kind of recognition I needed. I had done more than just fix a project. I had repaired the broken pieces of my own life. Meanwhile, news about Lillian's downfall began trickling in through quiet channels. Sabrina told me that Henry had left her, unable to deal with her constant need for control. She was now living back at her parents' house, and her social media was filled with desperate posts about moving forward. But the attention she thrived on had all but vanished. Sabrina also mentioned how Lillian's friends, who once supported her, had started distancing themselves. It seemed like the world had finally seen through her facade. But I didn't feel any satisfaction from it. I felt nothing. There was no joy in watching her fall from grace. I had already let go, and I wasn't going to let her take up any more space in my head. The project was winding down, and Emily's art program was almost over. Her final showcase was scheduled for the upcoming weekend, and she insisted I attend. At first, I didn't want to. I wasn't in the mood for crowds or applause. But she insisted, and for once, I went without hesitation. When I arrived at the gallery, I was surprised by how different Emily's work was from what I expected. It wasn't polished or refined like some of the others. It was raw, honest. One photograph in particular caught my eye. It was of me and her, sitting on a stone staircase near the harbor, laughing at something small. I didn't even remember the moment, but the photo captured something pure. "When did you take that?" I asked, staring at the picture. She smiled softly. "You were too busy trying to explain why pigeons are fearless." I chuckled. "It's a good picture." She nodded. "It's honest." For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. Not a rushed, forced peace, but a real, grounded calm. I looked at the picture again before taking out my phone. I opened up my long-silent social media account and posted it with one simple line. "Sometimes peace looks like starting over quietly." I felt no need for anything else, no need to prove anything to anyone. My life had moved on, and I had found my peace in places I never thought I would. And then I did one more thing. I unblocked Lillian. It wasn't out of spite. I just wanted her to see that life had gone on without her, that she hadn't paused my world when she walked out. I didn't need her to understand, but I did it anyway, knowing that I was finally free. That night, I turned off my phone and went to bed, knowing that the next morning, I would wake up with no more weight on my shoulders. It wasn't long after I unblocked Lillian that the storm came. I had gone to bed that night, feeling the weight of the past finally lifting off my shoulders. But by morning, my phone was buzzing relentlessly. Unknown numbers filled the screen, and I knew what that meant. The floodgates had opened, and I was now the target of her fury. When I opened the first missed call, I could feel the anger building in her voice. I didn't answer. Another call. And another. Her messages started to flood in, all of them demanding to know how I could do this to her, how I could just move on like she meant nothing. I didn't respond. I wasn't about to let her drag me back into her drama, not after everything I'd been through. The messages didn't stop. Then, around midday, I saw one that was different. It wasn't a typical angry rant, but a message that stood out from the rest. What? It was from Lillian. One word. All caps. I stared at it for a moment, trying to decide if I should even bother opening the rest. But there was no need. I knew exactly what would come next. More accusations, more twisted versions of what had happened. I deleted it without opening the others. She had no more power over me. The rest of the day was a blur. My phone didn't stop vibrating. She was relentless. Messages came pouring in, one after another, each more frantic than the last. By the time I had finished my work for the day and was heading back to the apartment, I knew it was just a matter of time before she escalated things further. By evening, she had switched from anger to hysteria. She sent me a long voicemail that I didn't listen to. Her words were distorted with rage, accusing me of betraying her, of ruining her life. The final message came with a chilling threat. "You'll regret this. Everyone will know who you really are." It was almost comical, how predictable she had become. But it wasn't funny anymore. It was just sad. The next morning, I got a call from Gary at work. He sounded unusually cautious. "Hey, Daniel," he said. "We received a long email from a woman named Lillian." Claims you brought someone to Barcelona under suspicious circumstances. Just wanted to let you know. I sighed deeply. It was happening. She was dragging my name through the mud, trying to make me out to be the bad guy to anyone who would listen. But I wasn't worried. Gary had known me long enough to trust my integrity. She's my ex, I said, my voice calm. She's upset. I moved on. Nothing more to it. Gary didn't seem surprised. I figured as much. Don't worry, I'll forward it to legal. You're fine. I hung up, feeling a mix of frustration and relief. I had prepared for this. I had known she would try to destroy me on the way out, but it didn't matter anymore. I was done with her. Done with the drama. I wasn't going to let her dictate my life. That night, Sabrina called me again. She wasn't as concerned as before, but there was an edge to her voice. Lillian's gone too far now, she said. She's emailed your company. Said you manipulated her. And then she called Mom and Dad. What's going on? I felt the anger bubbling up inside me, but I kept my voice steady. I've already explained everything to them. I told them the truth about her. About Henry. About everything. Sabrina was quiet for a moment, then said, You know, she's really lost it. I called her out, told her she was making things worse. She just doesn't get it. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. Let her make her noise. She's desperate for attention. I'm not giving her what she wants. The next few days were a blur of messages, phone calls, and updates from Sabrina. It felt like the world had temporarily stopped caring about anything else. Lillian's online presence was nothing but a chaotic storm of emotional outbursts. She was still trying to control the narrative, twisting the truth, painting herself as the victim of my betrayal. Her posts became more dramatic. Quotes about heartbreak, revenge, and how choosing yourself sometimes meant losing others. I didn't care to read them. I didn't care what she said about me. I had already seen through her act. By the end of the week, it became clear that the support she once had from her friends was starting to dwindle. The comments on her posts were fewer, the likes less frequent. She had burned too many bridges, and this time, no one was going to come running to her rescue. Sabrina filled me in on the latest. She's just spiraling, she told me. Henry left her. He stopped paying for her rent and everything. Now she's back at her parents' house, trying to pick up the pieces. I wasn't sure what to feel. Part of me felt sorry for her, but the larger part of me had moved on. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. A few weeks passed. The project in Barcelona was almost complete, and I was back to a routine I could count on. My relationship with Emily had deepened, but there were no rushes, no promises, just two people figuring out what came next without the weight of old baggage holding them back. Then one day, as I was checking the progress on the site, I got a message from Sabrina. She's trying to make a comeback online, she said. Posting new pictures, new quotes. But no one's biting. Her followers have stopped engaging with her. I didn't feel any satisfaction from it. I didn't even feel pity. All I knew was that I was done with that chapter of my life. And as much as Lillian seemed to want to make herself the center of attention, I was busy building something better. I had my work, my peace, and Emily, none of which had room for her chaos. And so, as the final days of the project in Barcelona wound down, I realized I had finally escaped the grip of the past. I was free. What was broken? The project in Barcelona finally came to a close, and the sense of accomplishment was hard to ignore. Gary had called to congratulate me again. You pulled off a rescue job, Daniel. We're ahead of schedule, and the client's pleased. When you get back, we'll talk about a promotion. I nodded, grateful but not overwhelmed. It was good to be recognized, but the satisfaction of getting this project done didn't come from external praise. It came from within. The truth was, I was rebuilding my life, piece by piece. And with each step forward, the weight of the past grew lighter. The days became a blur of meetings, calls, and the normal hustle of work, but I found my mind wandering more often than not. Sabrina kept in touch, updating me on Lillian's antics, how she was trying to rebrand herself online, posting pictures of herself in more healing poses. But no one was buying it anymore. The comments were dry, the likes sparse, and for the first time, it seemed like her performance was running out of steam. Her followers, the ones who had once rallied behind her, were now silent. It was strange how quickly things changed. One moment she was the center of attention, and the next she was trying to grasp onto any last shred of relevance. I wasn't angry. I wasn't satisfied. I was just indifferent. I had done the work I needed to do. I had let go of what she had tried to keep alive, and now I was free. Free from her manipulation, her games, her lies. Back home in Chicago, things were quieter. I was back in my apartment, which now felt like a sanctuary. A place that had once held the ghosts of past arguments and silent nights now felt like the beginning of something new. Emily had stayed in Barcelona a little longer to finish her art program, but we kept in touch regularly. Her calls became my highlight. Nothing grand, nothing complicated. Just two people who understood each other in ways that felt natural. One evening, while sitting on the balcony of my apartment, I received a call from Sabrina. "Hey, you need to hear this," she said before I could even say hello. "Lillian's life is falling apart." I wasn't surprised. I didn't even feel the desire to ask for details. "What happened now?" I asked, leaning back in my chair, looking out over the cityscape. "She's posting about her life being so hard, how everything's a struggle, but it's all fake. Henry left her, Daniel. He stopped paying for her rent, stopped supporting her. She's back at her parents' place, and even they've stopped enabling her." I didn't know how to feel about it. I wasn't happy to hear it, but I didn't feel bad for her either. Life wasn't kind to people who built their world on lies. What did she expect? I said more to myself than to Sabrina. You can only pretend for so long before everyone sees the truth. "She's saying she's been betrayed by everyone," Sabrina continued, her voice quieter now. "That no one's there for her anymore. It's like she's trying to force people to feel sorry for her." I smiled slightly, the first real smile in days. She's been manipulating everyone for years. Now that the truth's out, she's got nothing left. "I know," Sabrina said, sounding both sad and relieved. "I just wish she hadn't dragged everyone into her mess. But I'm done with it. We all are." A few months passed, and the noise around Lillian's online persona eventually faded away. Her posts became more sporadic, and her followers dwindled. Meanwhile, I was moving forward. The work was steady, and when I got back to the office, Gary was true to his word. I was promoted and given more responsibility. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control of my own life. As for Emily, we talked more seriously about the future. There was no rush, no need for promises. We were both cautious, but the bond we had was undeniable. One evening, as we shared dinner at my place, Emily looked at me and asked, "Have you thought about what comes next?" I paused, setting my fork down. "I'm thinking about it. But the thing is, I'm not in a rush anymore. I've learned that sometimes, the best thing you can do is just take things one step at a time. No expectations. No pressure. Just peace." She smiled, a quiet understanding passing between us. "I'm glad. You deserve that peace." A year after everything had fallen apart with Lillian, my life was nothing like it used to be. I had taken on more projects, including some international assignments, and I had earned the trust and respect of my colleagues. My relationship with Emily had grown into something steady and real, and I felt a sense of security in knowing that, no matter what, I had rebuilt the foundation of my life. One afternoon, while I was in the middle of a meeting, I received a notification from my phone. It was a message from Sabrina, and I couldn't help but open it. "I just ran into Lillian," she wrote. "She looks different, thinner, older. She didn't even recognize me at first." I felt a twinge of something, sympathy, maybe, or perhaps just curiosity. I wasn't sure. But what I did know was that it didn't matter. I had moved on, and so had she. Sabrina's message continued. "She's still trying to keep up the act. But it's not working anymore." I nodded to myself, almost feeling like I should say something to Sabrina. "Let her try," I typed back. "But she can't rewrite her past. It's over." I looked up from my phone and back at the project details in front of me. My mind was clear, my focus sharper than ever. The past was behind me, and there was nothing more to say or do. It was time to focus on the future, the one I had built for myself, free from the lies and chaos that once defined my world. And for the first time in a long time, I knew that everything was exactly as it should be. The weeks following the end of the Barcelona project were filled with an unexpected sense of calm. Life seemed to fall into place, a series of well-ordered moments that felt neither too fast nor too slow. The chaos that had once defined my relationship with Lillian seemed like a distant memory, something I could almost look back on without any emotional weight. It was as if the storm had passed, and I was standing in the calm aftermath. The work continued to flow smoothly. I was now managing multiple projects across different cities, and the new responsibilities were challenging but fulfilling. Gary had entrusted me with more leadership, and I was growing into the role more confidently each day. But beyond the professional success, it was the personal peace I had found that made everything feel truly different. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. Emily and I had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Our relationship had developed without the pressure of expectations, just two people who enjoyed each other's company and supported one another's growth. I had found someone who appreciated the quiet moments as much as the loud ones. It was refreshing, having someone who didn't need to fill every gap with words or grand gestures. One afternoon, while I was on a break between meetings, I received a notification. It was from Sabrina again. She had sent a message that was simple but sent a ripple of emotion through me. Lillian's trying to get her life together. She's working at a boutique now, barely scraping by. It's like she's finally come to terms with everything. But she doesn't seem happy. I didn't know what to make of it. I felt a small pang of something. Maybe it was regret, or maybe it was a fleeting moment of empathy. It was strange to hear that she was struggling, knowing that she had once been a huge part of my life. But I also knew that the person she had become was a result of her choices, and those choices were not ones I could fix for her. Sabrina's message continued. She says she's trying to start fresh, but it feels different this time. She's not fighting anymore. I sat back, staring at the message. I had been so caught up in the whirlwind of my own life that I hadn't thought much about her. But now, hearing that she was trying to move forward without the fight, I felt a strange sense of closure. It wasn't that I wanted her to suffer, but I realized that her battles were no longer mine to fight. It was her turn to face the consequences of her actions, and I had done all I could do. I didn't reply to Sabrina immediately. Instead, I took a deep breath and let the silence settle in. I had moved on from the past in a way that I never thought possible. I wasn't angry at Lillian anymore, nor did I feel the need to keep tabs on her. What happened between us was done. What mattered now was the life I had rebuilt, the future that was mine to shape. A few weeks later, I found myself walking down the street after a long day at work, the weight of a successful presentation still lingering in my mind. As I turned the corner, I spotted a familiar face across the street. It was Lillian. She was standing outside a small cafe, looking somewhat lost in her thoughts, just like I had so many times before. She didn't see me at first, and I almost kept walking, not sure whether it would be worth it to stop. But then, as if on cue, she turned, and our eyes met. For a brief moment, I could see the same vulnerability in her eyes that I had seen the night she left. She didn't speak. She didn't approach me. She just stood there, as if waiting for something to happen. I stopped. We stood there in silence, across the street from one another, both of us frozen in time. It felt surreal, seeing her like this, so different from the person who had once been such a central part of my life. Finally, I gave a small nod, acknowledging the moment, and without saying a word, I turned and walked away. I didn't need to have a conversation. There was no more unresolved tension between us. No more drama. No more past to revisit. It was in that moment that I realized just how much I had changed. I had come to terms with everything. Lillian was no longer a part of my story, and I wasn't part of hers anymore. And that was okay. It was exactly as it should be. Back at home that evening, I sat in my living room, reflecting on everything that had happened. I thought about the pain, the heartbreak, the lies, and the rebuilding. But most of all, I thought about how far I had come. The man who had once been lost in a toxic relationship was now standing on his own 2 feet, stronger and more grounded than ever. Emily called that night, her voice light and easy. "Hey, how was your day?" It was good, I replied. A little unexpected, but good. There was a brief pause before she asked, "What happened?" "I ran into someone I never thought I'd see again," I said, leaning back on the couch. "But it was fine. Just a moment, you know?" "I know," she said softly. "Sometimes those moments are all you need to know that you've really moved on." I smiled, grateful for her understanding. Exactly. The next few months passed without much fanfare. The projects I was working on continued to succeed, and my relationship with Emily grew stronger. Life had become simple again. I had rediscovered the joy of living for myself, of not needing to chase after approval or validation from anyone else. And Lillian? She faded from my thoughts. Her posts stopped showing up on my feed, and I heard less and less about her from Sabrina. There was no bitterness, no resentment. Just peace. The peace I had earned.